Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into some pretty cool science?
I think cool is an understatement.
I think you might be right about that.
We're talking about the P2300 Easy Mount Ussing chamber system.
It's a tool that's letting scientists study epithelial tissue in a whole new way.
And epithelial tissue is kind of a big deal.
Yeah, tell us a bit more about that.
Well, it's essentially the lining of our organs and cavities.
Oh, so it's like the barrier between our insides and the outside world.
Exactly. It's our first line of defense.
No wonder scientists are so interested in it.
Right. And understanding how it works is crucial for so many things.
Like what?
Drug development,
Okay,
disease research,
makes sense.
even nutrition.
Wow, so it really does touch on pretty much everything.
It really does.
Okay, so then how does this Ussing chamber system help scientists study this epithelial tissue?
So imagine
Okay,
a tiny controlled environment
Hmm.
where scientists can place a piece of tissue.
like a little mini lab for cells?
Exactly. It's like a mini lab for studying how things move across these barriers.
I'm starting to see why you said cool was an understatement.
It's pretty remarkable technology.
So let's talk about the P2300 Easy Mount system specifically.
Okay.
What makes it so special?
One of the biggest things is its versatility.
Like how?
It can accommodate different types of tissue.
Oh, that makes sense because I imagine the lining of your lungs is pretty different from, say, the lining of your stomach.
Exactly. And the P2300 uses these interchangeable sliders.
Sliders.
Yeah, it's kind of like having different adapters for your phone charger.
Okay, so you can swap them out depending on what type of tissue you're studying.
Exactly. It makes the system super adaptable.
That's really clever.
And another key feature is the precise control it gives researchers over the environment inside the chamber.
Okay, why is that so important?
Well, think about it. Our tissues function in a very specific environment.
Right, like with a certain temperature and pH level.
Exactly. So to really understand how they behave, you need to recreate those conditions in the lab.
So you're saying the P2300 lets scientists basically mimic what's going on inside our bodies.
Precisely. And that level of control is essential for getting accurate and reliable data.
It's like having a little window into the inner workings of our cells.
It really is. And with the P2300, that window is clearer than ever before.
Well, before we move on, I want to touch on something you mentioned earlier.
Hmm.
You said that setting up these experiments used to be pretty tricky.
Oh, it definitely was.
So how does the Easy Mount system address that?
Well, as the name suggests, it makes mounting the tissue a whole lot easier.
Oh, I see.
The design is much more user-friendly.
And I imagine that leads to more consistent results.
You got it.
Hmm.
Because if your setup is finicky, your data might be too.
Makes sense. So they really focused on streamlining the whole process.
They did. They really wanted to create a system that was both powerful and easy to use.
Okay, so we've talked about the versatility and the easy mounting.
Yes.
But what about the actual measurements? How does the P2300 help scientists study things like ion transport and barrier function?
Well, one of the key things it measures is something called short circuit current, or ISKIC.
Short circuit current.
Yeah, it sounds a bit intimidating, but it's basically a way to quantify the net movement of charged particles across the tissue.
So it tells you how much stuff is flowing in and out of the cells.
Exactly, and that gives us insights into the active transport mechanisms at play.
And I'm guessing this is important for understanding things like how drugs are absorbed or how diseases affect tissue function.
Exactly. It's a really valuable piece of information.
So it sounds like the P2300 is a pretty comprehensive system.
It really is.
It gives researchers a lot of control over their experiments and a lot of data to work with.
And that's why it's become such a valuable tool in so many different areas of research.
This is all incredibly fascinating.
It is, isn't it?
But I have to admit, I'm still a little fuzzy on some of the details.
Oh, no problem. Happy to clarify.
Can we break down some of the specific components of the system and how they all work together?
Absolutely. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll take a closer look at things like the voltage current clamp and the data acquisition package.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
I'm ready to get even deeper into the mechanics of this amazing tool.
I'm excited to share more.
Okay, so we're back and ready to dive deeper into the mechanics of the P2300.
It's not just about having a chamber, it's really the integrated tools that elevate the system to the next level.
Okay, you've got my attention. What kind of tools are we talking about here?
Well, one of the key components is the voltage current clamp.
Voltage current clamp.
Yeah, it sounds a little intimidating.
Yeah, a little bit.
But it's basically what allows researchers to precisely control the electrical potential across the tissue.
Okay, I think I'm going to need you to break that down for me a bit.
Sure.
What exactly do you mean by electrical potential?
So think of the tissue as a tiny battery. It has
Mhm.
a positive and a negative side,
Okay,
and there's a difference in electrical charge between them.
I see.
That difference is the electrical potential.
Okay, so the voltage current clamp lets researchers manipulate that potential.
Exactly. And by controlling that potential, they can create an environment where they can very accurately measure the movement of ions across the tissue.
So it's like setting up a controlled experiment where you can isolate and measure specific ionic currents.
You got it. And that level of control is crucial for understanding how different factors like drugs or changes in pH affect ion transport.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
And you mentioned something earlier about a data acquisition package.
Yes.
So what role does that play in all of this?
Well, once you've set up your experiment and you're collecting all this data, you need a way to record and analyze all that information.
Right, because you can't just be scribbling numbers down on a piece of paper.
Not with the P2300. The data acquisition package is a sophisticated computer system that interfaces with the Ussing chamber
Okay.
and records all the measurements in real time.
Oh, wow. So it's all digitized and automated.
Yeah, it streamlines the whole process.
Yeah.
And the software even lets researchers visualize and analyze the data.
So no more manually crunching numbers in a spreadsheet.
Nope. It's all done for you.
It's really amazing how much technology is packed into this system.
It really is. They've really thought of everything to make research easier and more efficient.
So it's not just the voltage current clamp and the data acquisition package.
Right.
What are some other things that make the P2300 so user-friendly?
Well, even the design of the chambers themselves is really well thought out. For example, the chambers are transparent.
Okay, why is that important?
It allows researchers to visually monitor the tissue throughout the experiment.
Oh, that's clever. So they can catch any problems or artifacts that might be happening.
Exactly. It's like having an extra set of eyes on your experiment.
And I bet it saves a lot of time and frustration.
It definitely does.
So it seems like they really went the extra mile to create a system that's both powerful and intuitive.
They did, and that's a big part of why the P2300 has become so popular.
It lets researchers focus on the science rather than getting bogged down in technical difficulties. Okay, well, I think we've got a pretty good understanding now of the technical side of things.
Yes.
But can we talk about some real-world applications? Like how are researchers actually using the P2300 to make new discoveries?
Absolutely. So let's start with cystic fibrosis.
Okay, a serious genetic disorder.
Right. And one of the hallmarks of this disease is a defect in a protein called CFTR.
CFTR.
It plays a crucial role in ion transport across epithelial tissues.
So in cystic fibrosis, this transport process is disrupted.
Exactly. It's like the gatekeeper function of the epithelial tissue is compromised.
And I'm guessing that leads to all sorts of problems.
It does. It leads to buildup of thick mucus in the lungs,
Oh, wow.
making it hard to breathe and increasing the risk of infections.
So how does the P2300 come into play here?
Well, researchers are using it to study exactly how those mutations in the CFTR gene affect ion transport in lung tissue.
So they can actually see how those genetic changes are impacting the cells at a molecular level.
Exactly, and that's really important for developing new drugs and therapies that can target the underlying cause of the disease.
So instead of just treating the symptoms, they can actually try to fix the problem.
Precisely. It's all about getting to the root of the issue.
That's amazing. And it sounds like this could have implications for other diseases as well.
It does. Cystic fibrosis is just one example.
Okay.
The P2300 is being used to study a wide range of conditions.
Like what?
Inflammatory bowel disease,
Hmm.
asthma, even cancer.
Wow, it really is a versatile tool.
It really is, and it's helping us make significant progress in understanding and treating these diseases.
Okay, so before we move on, I just want to make sure I'm getting the big picture here.
Okay.
We've talked about how the P2300 allows researchers to control the environment around a piece of tissue
Right.
and measure ion transport.
Yes.
But can you give me a specific example of what one of these experiments might actually look like?
Sure. So let's say a researcher is studying the effects of a new drug on intestinal permeability. They would start by obtaining a small sample of intestinal tissue.
Like from a biopsy?
It could be. They would carefully secure that tissue between the two halves of the chamber,
Okay.
creating a barrier between two compartments that are filled with a solution that mimics the fluids found in the body.
So they're creating like a miniature version of the intestine in the lab.
Exactly. Then they would establish a baseline measurement of the tissue's electrical properties and ion transport using the voltage current clamp.
And then they would introduce the drug.
Precisely. They would add the drug to one of the compartments and then carefully monitor how it affects ion transport across the tissue.
Oh, that's so cool. So they can actually see if the drug is being absorbed and how it's impacting the cells?
Exactly, and they can compare those measurements to the baseline to really see the drug's specific effects.
It's like watching a tiny drama unfold right there in the Ussing chamber.
It really is fascinating, and this is just one example. Researchers are using the P2300 to study so many different processes.
Like what?
Drug absorption,
Hmm.
nutrient transport,
Makes sense.
the effects of toxins,
Oh, wow.
even environmental pollutants on epithelial tissues.
The possibilities really are endless.
They really are, and as we continue to learn more, I'm sure we'll discover even more amazing applications for this tool.
This has been an incredibly informative deep dive so far,
Glad to hear it.
but I know there's still more to come.
There is.
So in the final part of our deep dive, we'll step back and look at the bigger picture.
We'll discuss the future of epithelial tissue research and how the P2300 is shaping the field.
Sounds fascinating. I'm eager to hear your thoughts on where this technology is headed and the impact it might have on healthcare.
Well, stay tuned. We've got some exciting insights to share in the final part of our deep dive.
All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the P2300 Easy Mount Ussing chamber system.
And I'm excited for this part.
Me too.
Mm,
It feels like we've gone from the basics all the way to cutting-edge science.
we have
So let's talk about the future.
the future.
Yeah. Where do you see this technology going? What kind of possibilities are on the horizon for the P2300?
Well, one area that I think is incredibly exciting is personalized medicine.
Personalized medicine.
Yeah. Imagine being able to take a small biopsy of a patient's tissue,
Okay.
study its properties in the Ussing chamber,
Hmm.
and then use that information to develop a personalized treatment plan.
That sounds futuristic, like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It does, doesn't it? But it's actually closer than you might think.
Really?
The P2300 is already giving us the ability to see how individual patients' tissues respond to different drugs or treatments.
So instead of a one-size-fits-all approach,
Right.
doctors could tailor treatments to each patient's unique biology.
Exactly. It's about moving towards more precise and effective healthcare.
That's pretty credible. And what about drug development? I know we talked about this a bit earlier,
Yeah.
but I'm curious to hear more about how the P2300 is changing the way new drugs are tested and evaluated.
Well, it's already having a huge impact.
How so?
Traditionally, new drugs were tested in animal models before moving to human clinical trials.
Right.
But animal models aren't always accurate predictors of how a drug will behave in humans.
That makes sense. Our biology is different.
It is, and the P2300 allows us to bridge that gap by letting researchers test drugs on actual human tissue in a controlled environment.
So you're getting much more relevant data about efficacy and potential side effects
Exactly, and that could potentially speed up the drug development process.
and reduce the reliance on animal testing.
Exactly. It's a win-win situation.
It sounds like the P2300 really is revolutionizing both research and clinical applications.
It is, and as technology continues to advance, I think we'll see even more creative uses for the Ussing chamber.
What kind of uses are you thinking of?
Well, there's growing interest in using the system to study the microbiome.
The microbiome.
All those trillions of bacteria and microorganisms that live in and on our bodies.
That's a hot topic these days. Everyone's talking about the microbiome.
For good reason. It plays a huge role in our health.
But how does it relate to epithelial tissue?
Well, our epithelial tissues are constantly interacting with the microbiome.
I see.
And those interactions can have a big impact on whether we stay healthy or get sick.
Okay, so the P2300 can help us study those interactions.
Exactly. It gives us a way to see how the microbiome is influencing the health of our epithelial tissues.
Wow, so we're talking about things like how the bacteria in our gut affect the lining of our intestines.
Exactly. And that could have huge implications for treating conditions like inflammatory bowel disease.
It's incredible to think that this little chamber with a piece of tissue can tell us so much about these complex systems in our bodies.
It really is a testament to the power of scientific ingenuity.
It's amazing to think how far we've come.
It is. From those early Ussing chambers to this sophisticated P2300 system.
And it's exciting to think about where we'll go from here.
Absolutely. As we continue to explore the intricate world of epithelial tissue, I have no doubt that we'll make even more groundbreaking discoveries.
Leading to new treatments and therapies and a deeper understanding of the human body.
Exactly. It's an incredible time to be involved in this field.
Well, this deep dive has been absolutely fascinating. I've learned so much.
I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you for sharing your expertise with us and taking us on this journey into the world of the P2300 Easy Mount Ussing chamber system.
It's been my pleasure. I'm always excited to talk about this amazing technology.
And to our listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive as much as we have.
Stay curious and keep exploring. The world of science is full of wonder and possibility.
Thanks for joining us.